You're listening to the Clean Comedy Podcast with James Creviston and LukeLacoy.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Clean Comedy Podcast. I'm James Creviston. I'm with my co-host, Mr. LukeLacoy.
Call me Lukey L.
Lukey L. And we have the best guest today. Like, I'm seriously excited about this. I think I've been trying to get him. Okay, so I'm going to tell a story, and he's listening, but I'm going to tell a story. I've been trying to get him on the podcast. I even cornered him at Flappers one time, and like, he was in the middle of a show. So this was like the worst thing. Don't ever do this to anybody. But I introduced myself, and I was like, hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast sometime. And he's so nice about it. He's like, yeah, sure. Just shoot me an email. And then, but he has like the best like gatekeeper in the business to like keep me away. So I probably emailed like every couple of months trying to get him on the podcast. So finally he was like, he's doing all these online Zoom classes. And if any of you guys want to learn from a master, this is the person to learn from. He's doing all these classes. I'm like, you know what, for $25, I'm going to go learn from him. I've already taken a couple other courses. I'm going to go learn from him. And then afterwards, he's going to know my face and my name, and I'm going to bug him and ask him to be on the podcast, and it's going to work out. And that's what happened. So
totally worked. Totally worked.
So
I was
please.
Like, now I was able to tie the face, and I go, wait a second. I saw the guy at Flappers. He came at me right in the middle of a show.
He cornered me by the kitchen and asked if I'd be on his podcast. And that's really what happened. I felt bad after I walked away. And what's funny is Jerry had you. So it's Jerry Corley. He's the one of the greatest comedy gurus of all time. So Jerry, thank you for being on the podcast. First of all,
it's my pleasure.
So I literally cornered him in there, and then a week later he had a blog post about how you should approach people about talking to them or getting them to like do your show or be on a podcast or interview. And I was like, oh, he wrote that because of me. That's like my fault. So
No, I don't think they were connected.
I don't know if that's true.
I think this was because I got an email from somebody. I've gotten a couple of these emails where it's like, yeah, you can find my video on YouTube under, some like Jimmy C or something like that. And I was like, dude, send me a link at least. Don't have me search.
So Jerry is probably one of the best. He's one of the first people that I ever learned any comedy stuff from. I bought every book. I went on every website. I did everything. One of the first books I ever bought was the Comedy DNA book,
The Breaking Comedy's DNA.
Oh my gosh. Like, if you want to talk about a Bible for comedy, I know Judy, she has her comedy Bible. I'm sorry, Judy, that's not a Bible. You got to go get Jerry's book. That's a Bible. And then you're going to learn real comedy stuff. Well,
bless Judy's heart. I mean, and I do love Judy. I don't put it down anybody. And she's been doing it for a while. She's an insanely good marketer, but can't write a joke to save her life.
That's what I'm saying. It's not the Bible for comedy.
But she cares. I mean, she's, and I don't, like I said, I don't put people down. I like to synergize, and work with people, but it's like, that's not how you write. I took a workshop of hers in Palm Springs. And because I like to learn from everybody, I was like, what if somebody has some little nugget that flips that light switch, and so I could share it with other people. So I pay for this thing in Palm Springs, and you got to sign these people. And it was like one of the scheduled workshops was for a joke writing workshop. And and it's like Judy Carter was teaching it and this other guy. And I said, I'm going to take it with Judy. And they're, well, that's already full. You can't get in. Well, I'm going anyway, because I didn't pay to go to, I don't know this other dude, but I want to go to, Judy. She's the one with the Bible. So I go in there, and I kid you not. And this is the thing. And again, it's not to shoot her down. She's given people lots of great tools. That whole, this is weird. What's weird, what's confusing, what's odd. That can get you really rolling, but it doesn't really drill down to the why people laugh. So, oh my God, I feel like I'm one of those YouTube commercial guys, it's like they don't too many hands. But so she does this thing, and she goes, well, sometimes when I do a joke for corporate, I'll let them know where the punchline is by doing this. I go, ta-da?
Yeah.
You give them a ta-da? If if you're doing this at the punchline, you better reevaluate the punchline, Judy. It's like, and I said that in the class, and I, because I was so appalled. Like, why would you? That's the information you're giving.
Right.
We're at a weekend whole retreat on how to write comedy, and this is the gem that I walk away with. I was like, and again, like if she and I were talking about it, we would have I think we'd have a laugh about it. I hope she wouldn't take it too much to heart. It's like sometimes when people ask a question, we don't have the answer on the top of our head. And then you do this. But I was like, wait a second. No, you could restructure that punchline. You have to create the surprise better. But look, comedy is one of the most underexplored art form of all of our art forms. Nobody's really, for years, they just sort of sat aside and went, well, you either got it or you don't. Yeah. And I'm like, that is not true, And, I've got people that I've worked with that were completely unfunny who are now called funny because they now can identify, oh, that's funny. Look, authentic Chinese cuisine, say habla español. How authentic can it be if they're speaking Spanish? I want authenticity too in a Chinese restaurant. I just don't want my waiter calling me amigo, But you know what I'm saying? It's like you can see it there now because your brain is now open to it, Right. So before you didn't know what made something funny, and then wow, incongruity. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
I love that. So for everyone who maybe, let's say no one's ever heard of you in their life, and if you haven't heard of Jerry and you are interested in comedy, you're under a rock. But where could kind of give us your backstory and a little bit about how you got into comedy?
So I had amazing parents. They said, don't just try something. They said, try everything. And so, I studied acting. I studied music. I played soccer. And I read an article that said women are more attractive to guys who play guitar. I played the trombone. It doesn't turn them on, doesn't get them hot. They're like, what, 7 positions? Oh, that's nothing. But I had a horn band at one time. I was studying acting, went to a lot of Juilliard summer programs, and then went to studied the actor studio, and I was getting commercials, and I was still playing soccer, and I played professional soccer for a short period of time. And then, I sucked. So I couldn't keep doing that. Actually blew out my knee and, just shredded the ACL. And they didn't have that surgery back then to fix it. So that career was over. Sort of the universe saying, now we're down your stuff. You're not. And so then when I was acting, I had this full head of red hair and I was booking a lot of commercials. And all of a sudden the hair started to recede. I stopped booking as many commercials. And one of my casting directors said to me, Jerry, we love you, but we don't know where to put you. You have a baby face and a receding hairline. That doesn't sell beer. And I said, oh man, I'm Ron Howard. I'm Ron Howard right now. I'm going through that Ron Howard effect. He had a baby face still does. Yeah. And I think he's like 72. I don't know how old he is, but he's, he still looks youthful. So then I said, what am I going to do? I got to work when I'm not working, because my dad was an actor for 60 years. I got him go through the ups and downs of his career. And I said, I got to figure something out. And I saw a class for comedy. It said, learn stand-up comedy. And I was like, it was actually Greg Dean's class. Oh, yeah. Okay. And so I took Greg's class, and I worked as sort of his assistant for a while. And then we had a parting of ways. But I learned 1 or 2 kind of structures with him. And I said, wait a second, there's kind of a thing here. And then I just started to really go deep in research, like it was, my life depended on it. And it kind of did, because as a kid, I took apart my toys to see how they worked. And so it was like, why do people laugh? Does anybody know why? How are you going to make them laugh if you don't know how or why they laugh? It's like trying to be a pilot and fly a plane and you don't know why it flies. Well, it's the hand of God. And, it's like, you can't, that doesn't work. I don't want what ifs. I want science. So I found Melvin Helitzer's Comedy Writing Secrets. Now, great book. And he's a journalism professor at Ohio University. And he kind of broke down Gene Parrott's comedy writing step-by-step book, but he made it more of more palatable for the layperson. And if you can get past Melvin Helitzer's hokey jokes, because he's not a comedian, he's a journalism professor, you can see the value in that. And one of the things he had there was he had a psychologist have these reasons why people left. And some of them I agreed with, and some of them I didn't agree with. Like, and then I said, well, wait a second, I'm going to test these on the road. And I went on the road, and I was on the road pretty much 43 weeks out of every year for, I don't know, 27 years. Wow. But there was a space and time there where I wrote for the Tonight Show, right? And at one point when I was starting to delve into comedy, I was like, well, wait a second. I should probably go back to school and get my English degree. So I went to Chico State, way up north, because I figured I got to get out of LA. Every time I have a midterm, I'm getting called in for a callback for a commercial, and I'm missing in the midterm and failing a class, and I got to drop it. So I had to get away from LA. So I said, I'll go up there and I'll just finish. I'll get a degree. That way I have something to fall back on. And I would go to school. I said, I'm going to get straight A's. That's how we are at the beginning of every semester, right?
Of course.
And I went to the library, and I'd be going and I'd go to the library to study, and I'd wind up picking up magazines and newspapers on my way to a study table and writing jokes for like 4 hours. And I go, what am I doing? Why the hell am I studying for a career I don't want when I could be down in LA really chasing a career that I do want? And at that point I said, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, I'm leaving school. And I went back down, I called my dad and said, I'm going back down to LA. I'm just going to put full time into, I'm in school 6-7 hours a day. I want to do 6-7 hours a day of writing and studying comedy. And he goes, well, you have to find a coach. And I was like, come on, Dad, there's no coach for comedy. And turns out there is. Huh? And Gene Parrott had a correspondence course. Yep. And he also, and I said, do you coach one-on-one? He says, where do you live? I said, Chatsworth, California. He said, I'm in Studio City. We're like 20 minutes away. And so we started to meet once a week. And then he had this other guy work with me named Bob Mills. And Bob wrote for the Dean Martin Roasts. Yep. Gene Parrott wrote for Bob Hope and a lot of other shows. And so I had two of the key joke writers in Hollywood working with me, pushing me, and they would kind of ridicule me. One time the guy said, there was like, I forget it was Bob or Gene said, I know chicks who can write better than you.
It was Bob probably.
And back then, yeah, it's Bob Mills. But the reason they said that, there were no female writers in the business. So I think that's the reason he said that. Now I was a little offended because I was raised to be that way, because I have, 3 sisters and a mom. And if I didn't get offended, they would kill me. But then I went, well, wait a second. I get what he's trying to say, but these old dudes, screw it. If these old dudes are writing that many jokes, I can write this many jokes. So I had to find that kind of motivation too. And I started to really listen to what they said, bust my ass, meet those goals every week. And they just kept pushing me past my comfort zone. 10 jokes a day, 20, 30, 40 jokes. And that was tapped out. I can't do anymore. And it wound up being 80 to 120. And then they said, now you can't be fired. Yep. Then I got a job on Leno, and then I was fired. So
it's funny that you mentioned Gene, because he actually lives right up the street from me. We live in the same area, and he mentored me when I got my first writing gig to write for a comedian. I contacted him because I knew what he had done, and I said, hey, can you help me? And he met me at a Starbucks for like 2 hours. He talked to me about it. He gave me lots of advice. I made a couple grand off of writing jokes, and it was I took your DNA book, I wrote jokes, I put them on Twitter. Someone on Twitter, a big name comedian, I'll tell you offline, hired me to write jokes. I took those jokes. I went to Gene. Gene said, these are great jokes. You need to make sure that you can output jokes 50, 100, a week or whatever, you just need to knock them out. And that's what I did. So thanks to both of you. And that's funny that you both connected and now have connected to me. This is, I don't know. I feel like fate now is like really touching my life. No, it's so true, man. I get it, because there are things I go back and look at things that happened to me in my career. And I'm like, the universe, shining the spotlight down on the path. It was like, I met George Carlin at the Marriott Marquis in New York City after my first corporate that my father's agent booked for me. And then I'm standing there, and my car that's supposed to take me to JFK is late. And I'm like looking lost, and I hear a voice that goes, hey, you going to the airport? And I look over and I go, that guy looks a lot like George Carlin. I was like, oh, yeah. He goes, want to ride with me? Hey, JFK, right? I go, yeah. I said, he goes, well, I got plenty of room. I said, if it's not an imposition,
And he said, no, you look like a nice guy. Got in the car and he goes, my name's George. And I go, oh shit, it is George. Oh, I can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
My mouth stopped working. And he's like, what do you do? I said, I paint houses. Because I couldn't say I was a comedian in front of George Carlin. But he goes, what do you mean paint houses? Like in paint houses? Or do you really like latex? Meaning, you know, execute for the mob. So I said, no, I latex. And he goes, oh, because you're a pretty funny guy. And then I did something else. And he goes, you're really funny. What do you really do? I said, I'm a comedian. And he goes, stop the car. And he was joking, but he goes, 10 million people in New York City, I get the comedian, right?
Yeah.
What are the odds? And then turns out his agent told him to study my dad to become a better character actor. Wow. And I said, who's your agent? He said, he mentioned the name. And I said, that's my dad's agent. And so we just started talking. And then he said, hey, if you see me playing anywhere, please, you know, call me, call the hotel, ask him where I'm staying, call the hotel. I'll set you up for tickets and then come see me after and say hello. And it was like very New York theater type of attitude, you know, just so kind. Would you see Carlin? And it's like, and then he's so kind. That's so interesting. And then I remember having conversations sometimes, probably 3 or 4 different conversations with him, 2 or 3 hours after shows, sitting there having a glass of wine or a beer, and he'd have a glass of wine and a painkiller. And that was his drug of choice at the time. And we'd talk about comedy. And so he's the one who said, I know with 98% accuracy, a joke is funny before I step on stage. Yep. And I said, how do you know that? He said, because it contains all the elements necessary for a joke to be funny. And he said, what are those elements? And I said, and he said, you're going to have to learn those on your own, kid. But then he mellowed and said, I think the reason I said this is I can't verbalize it. I just know intuitively what it is. And he said, maybe you can find out what they are and put them down on paper and show them to people. And I took that as a command, you know, right, and that's when I just set that goal. I said, I'm going to find out why this works. Yeah. You know, that person laughed. There's a reason. What's the stimuli that triggered that laugh? And I identified 9 psychological laughter triggers. And then the major comedy structures that people use, there are 13 of them, maybe 14. I haven't decided whether one's going to be one yet, or whether it's a device that falls into a structure. You know, it's almost like labeling the English language in a way, you know, but my goal is to create a theory that's similar to music theory. This is where people think it's crazy. That is similar to music theory that people can now plug in and notice how, oh, you're right, this does work like this. You can write a reverse. You can write an incongruity associative joke like this. You can write paired phrases. You can do compare and contrast and all these simple truth. And it's like, all you have to do is now recognize it. When you see it, you can play it, you know? No, and if you don't know what's there, you can't use it.
Exactly. I think between your book, that book, and Gene's book, New Comedy Writing, those 2 books probably helped me understand how to write a joke better than anything else that I mean, yeah, watching stand-up does it, listening to stand-up does it, breaking down jokes, but I think those 2 really helped me a lot.
Yeah, the best, I think the initial piece of advice I got from Gene was take Johnny Carson's monologue. That's when it was, like Johnny Carson was the only thing on. Take Johnny's monologue, transcribe it, and then go back and try to find your own ending or your own punchline just for exercise. And then the next day, look at the headlines and try writing jokes, because now you feel the rhythm of the writing. And boy, yeah, I totally felt that. And then from there, then talking to him and learning about how, you know, what a connector is. But you know, still then I saw that even Gene it was mostly just the listing technique and connecting those ideas, right? Taking the 2 dissimilar ideas and connecting them, you know? And then I said, all right, but there's got to be more. And so I would listen to other comics and, okay, that guy just did, what would that be called? What would that be called? And I looked at Melvin Hellitzer's guide and he would say, this is called this. And then when I got out on the road, I tried other things and then developed more of them. While I was like, well, that seems to work consistently. This style of joke works consistently. I'd be like, you know, I would record the show, test the jokes, go into the room, listen to the jokes, take the notes like I was some lab tech in, you know, MIT. And that's kind of how I approached the comedy. It was like from a science point of view.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, okay, I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called Breaking Comedy's DNA. And then at the Writers Forum at the Friars Club, I was just me and a couple of guys. We'd go in there on Monday nights and everybody would have dinner and then have some drinks and commiserate. And I go, well, we got this room over here. Why don't we just write jokes? And some of the older guys were like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know? I go, when's the last time you wrote a new joke? 11 years. Like, you know, why?
I'm proud of it. Ugh.
Right? Yeah. It's like, well, my act works. And then, so it was like me and three dudes, and it wound up, then it sort of more people kept coming into this little thing, and it kind of being a mini workshop. And it wound up being me and like 18 people, including 3 or 4 of the old timers that have been there a while. And they started going, you know, I thought I was going to throw that joke away. You fixed it. How did you fix it? How do you know that works? And I go, well, there's a certain structure. And they go, wow, you're like the joke doctor. So you make jokes well. And then I walk in for dinner and they go, hey, the joke doctor's here. And then so that's kind of how the name stuck. You know, I didn't name me the joke doctor. I was just like, they started naming me the joke doctor. Because I would take that joke, hey, you know, you could fix that if you just did this. How do you do that? How do you do that? You know?
I think it's interesting. So when you had that conversation from George Carlin, then kind of like all your investigation, that's kind of what ended up in Breaking Comedy's DNA, essentially?
Essentially, yes. Like when he said, you know, the elements necessary for a joke to work. And then I really started to, I started to look at every book I could find. And then who else has something on this? Gene Parrott was at the top of the list. I learned stuff from Greg, definitely. But then Melvin Helitzer kind of broke it down to sort of, since he was a university professor, I could see the university style of teaching and guidance that was in that book. And then I expanded on that based on my experience, because none of those dudes were doing stand-up. Right. You know, Gene wasn't, Greg wasn't. And I always thought that was weird, that teachers that were teaching comedy that hadn't been on stage in 30 years. Like how does that work? It's like, you know, taking flying lessons from a guy who doesn't have a pilot's license. At some point, you're going to crash, right? So, but again, I praise all the teachers that kind of do that work. One thing that does drive me crazy is when a teacher gives out blatantly false information. And it's like, or they paint something with a broad brush. It's always or never. How many things are always or never? Very few, if any. So I said, always be aware of somebody who says something like that, because, you know, even Picasso said, you got to know the rules before you can break the rules. And so you can always, it's comedy. It's an art form, by the way. And, you know, and comedy is a bit subjective, but there is also objective comedy where, you know, that joke's funny. Like, for example, you know, there's a paradoxical joke. If you said, like, one of my students wrote this joke. He was like, I just read this in New England Journal of Medicine. They were doing a study that said 1 in 10 men is gay. And he goes, 1 in 10 men is gay. Huh. And 10 in 1 man? That's super gay. I go, that's a great joke. You know, and now because of all of the political correctness, people are going to pull way back and say, you can't talk about that. Yeah. It's a scientific study. You know, we're just doing a paradoxical reference. Nobody's making fun of demeaning gay people. You know, I love gay people, you know, so it's like, but we are in that society where everybody's so ultra sensitive, and you have to make adjustments to it. Otherwise you spend your night fighting whether or not the joke is, you know, workable or not. So now I just avoid those things, but paradoxically that joke works. You know, it does.
And where do you see comedy going now that we have more, like, I mean, there's no place open, right? We're not doing stand up in LA or New York and stuff like that. Where do you see stand up going? Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, Zoom's the future or online shows the future. Where do you see comedy going if it stays like this?
You know, well, first of all, you know, I don't know. We were just talking about this. When do you think this is going to open up? When do you think we're going to get back to it? I said, maybe at the end of next year, the way it's going. That's hopefully, you know, if this vaccine works, but there's already so many people that, you know, are already anti-vaxxers, and it's like, how many are not going to take it? But, you know, we have anti-vaxxers when we had with the measles too, you know, so if we can bring down the caseload where it's mostly safe, where at least the ratio of deaths is now below driving a car in LA. And if that's happened, it's like, I think 1 in 105. Right. You have a 1 in 105 chance of dying in a car crash while driving a car. Right. Yeah. And it's like, which is why I don't understand the fear of flying. Right. Because your chance of dying in a plane crash, 1 in 11 million. So really, you and your emotional support jogs, leave them home. You know, because it's like I don't feel like walking by and getting, you know, wait a second, now I have PTSD. You know, it's like, so it's like, but I think it's going to get back. I think comedy is essentially a live, you know, interactive format. I mean, that's where laughter is contagious. When people are in a room and that community that's sort of commiserating and laughing with one another. But, you know, and this may pass and we may say, all right, well, it's gone. We don't have COVID to worry about anymore. And then we go back to just to the normal flu. But I tell you what, it's going to be years before we're okay with somebody coughing or sneezing in a comedy room without going COVID, you know. So that's what it's going to wind up being, I think. But we'll see what happens with the Zoom. I think what's interesting is there was a company a while ago that was pitched the Comedy Store as far as taking the room and putting a camera in there in like the original room and streaming it and charging people to buy a ticket to watch the original room. Just the like live action is just covering the room, just watching it. And I think was one of the managers said, oh, that would never work. No comics would ever agree to that, blah, 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 blah. And I said, how can you speak for all comics?
Yeah.
I said, it's a fantastic idea, you know? And I said, maybe you should talk to all the comics and maybe get releases from some of them that are willing to do that. And then you could black out those that are not. But to be able to have people streaming in from all over the world, do you realize the revenue stream and how fun it is to watch a comedian? Like, I love watching Bill Burr each day. And then watch him develop that piece that he's been working so hard to get to the point. And I'll go pay to see him through all of those iterations, you know, and then when he's taping the special, I'll go see him there, you know, and pay for it. So it's like, to watch that process is amazing. Nobody's going to lose anything. It's like watching baseball. They don't say you can only watch me on my good nights.
Yeah.
You know, I think it'd be great. I think it's fabulous for comedy. People get to see the process and watch people go through their ups and downs. And even Bill Burr is having a tough night because all they see Bill Burr is polish.
Right.
You know, I saw him eat it for 55 minutes at the Comedy Store. That was such a neat lesson. I mean, I felt bad for him being up there when he started to blame the audience. I'm like, tell him a joke, you know, stop blaming the audience. It's never the audience's fault. It's your job to find that audience's groove, you know? And it's like, and if you can't acknowledge it, you know, he does sometimes, he'll like, what is his go-to is like, why is it so quiet in here? You know, that's his release move. Right. And I love Bill Burr and watching him work. He teases the devil's advocate. He takes on material that's tough. He can talk about anything and find a way to make it funny, usually dropping an analogy. You know, it's like, you know, and then tie it to something that's not related, find the connector and boom, there's the laugh, you know, but he's great at that.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on. We appreciate it. Make sure you guys go check out Jerry, go check out his YouTube, check out his site, standupcomedyclinic.com. I think it's at Joke Doctor on Twitter, right? Is that right?
Yeah. At Joke Doctor on Twitter. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll engage with people, man. People have asked me questions and hey, I need help with a joke. And I've sat there and tweaked a joke for people. So it's like, I like engaging with people on that stuff.
You were the man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And this is like a dream come true for me. No, I appreciate it. Luke, where can people find you at?
LukeLacoy on the internet.
On the internet.
Yeah, Luke. Right. Luke, what's it? Luke L.
Yeah, Lukey L.
Lukey L.
We should change your handle. And you can find me at JamesDCreviston.com or ComedyPreneur.com. That's where I write.
ComedyPreneur.
Yeah, ComedyPreneur, like
Enunciation radio guy.
Sorry, ComedyPreneur.com.
We want to hear that. ComedyPreneur. I love that that moniker when you said ComedyPreneur, and because you had the background in the class, I was like, oh, I love that. That's cool, man.
Yeah, and it's all about the business of comedy, learning how to do things to make money. And because my motto on there is turn your funny into money, because it's something that's just, I think we all need to do, especially as comedians. We got to find ways to create revenue. So I appreciate people like you. I appreciate all the things that you do for all comedians. So thank you everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and go check out Jerry.